Now, Latrice Dorsey had just moved into this yellow house with her kids a few months ago after breaking up with her ex-boyfriend, a man who would not leave her alone.
He told me last week, he said, if I don't get in touch with your ex-wife, I'm going to come and shoot her in the head.
Developments in the death of a nursing student from Long Island. Police in Nicaragua arrested her ex-boyfriend today. Orlando Tercero could be extradited now back to the U.S. for questioning.
My baby is gone. I will never see her again.
Every day, reports of women getting killed continue to pour in across America and the rest of the world. But the most tragic thing about these cases is that most of these women fell victim at the hands of the people they loved. From teenagers to single moms, here are moments when women were executed by jealous boyfriends. Latrice Morris Dorsey. It was on Sunday, the 18th day of June, 2017, when Latrice Morris Dorsey, a beautiful black mother of 3, started preparations to celebrate with her father. That day was Father's Day, and Mrs. Dorsey, like any other good daughter, wanted to make it special for her dad. However, her plans were cut short when a man in black stormed into the apartment she shared with her kids and began a heated argument. The noise of the feud got to the ears of Latrice's 14-year-old son, Justin, who was utterly confused as to what was going on. But then, just while he was trying to make sense of the situation, he heard gunshots. Dazed and completely terrified, Justin rushed into the room. That's when he saw his mom bleeding on the floor, about to take her last breath. But right before she died in his arms, Justin spotted the murderer fleeing the scene of the crime in a black car. But the real shocking revelation came later, when the little boy found out that the same man who broke into their home and killed his mom was her ex-boyfriend.
Witnesses say he had a cold, calculated plot to kill. Brand new revelations in court against a man charged with gunning down a Detroit mother as her children looked on.
Latrice's death didn't go unnoticed. In fact, it was barely minutes after she was shot that neighbors stormed the building, inquiring what happened. Upon seeing the lifeless body of Mrs. Dorsey, they knew a very tragic crime had occurred. The police were quickly invited, and Justin, who happened to be the last person to see his mom alive, gave his report. According to Justin, he was actually in a back room playing games with his headphones on, so he could only hear muffled sounds. It wasn't until his younger sis ran to tell him mom had been shot that he knew for sure that the sounds he heard following the argument were actually gunshots. After describing the fleeing assailant, and also from reports gathered by close family and friends, police labeled 38-year-old Earl Maxwell as a suspect in the murder of Latrice Dorsey. Earl was her ex-boyfriend. It turns out that Latrice, a certified physical therapist, had just relocated to her new home on the west side of Detroit months before the incident. The reason for this was for the young mom to get some peace, distancing herself away from the troublesome partner. However, Earl wasn't handling the split so well. Statements from family and friends of the deceased after the incident revealed that the ex, Earl Maxwell, has always been a problem. And even when the young mom decided it was best to part ways, he still wouldn't leave her alone.
Police say Dorsey's ex-boyfriend, Earl Maxwell, shot her multiple times in her home near 8 Mile and the Southfield Freeway. Dorsey's teenager heard arguing followed by gunshots, and neighbors recalled what happened next.
He just said, help, that's, my mama's been shot, my mama gonna die. I don't know if he didn't kill my mama, I don't know what's going on.
True to his word, Earl murdered Latrice right in front of her 4-year-old daughter. Earl's gruesome actions left the victim's kids, including her ex-husband, Paul Dorsey, devastated.
She said he came in and he said hi to Jada, to her, and he started shooting her mom. Yeah, and shot her 5 times.
It took quite a while before Maxwell was finally found. However, it wasn't a typical hunt down and arrest situation, as the 38-year-old simply turned himself in after a few days. After his arrest, he was accused of felony, firearms violations, and first-degree murder. And when he finally showed up in court, all hell broke loose.
The woman was shot and killed in her home while her kids were also in the house. And today, 37-year-old Earl Maxwell will be in court facing charges for her murder. It's been 4 months since the death of a Detroit mother shot and killed in her own home. This was the scene that day as family and friends learned Latrice Morris Dorsey was murdered.
During the court hearing, the autopsy report of Latrice was analyzed, and it was confirmed that she was shot not 5, but 10 times. It was revealed that Maxwell's real issue was the fact that Latrice was dating someone else after breaking up with him.
Testimony today at Maxwell's preliminary hearing indicated they'd broken up and she was dating someone else, and clearly Maxwell was upset. Her estranged husband testified about a few phone calls with Maxwell.
What did he say the first time you spoke?
When I see your wife, I'm gonna kill her. The second time he called, he reiterated that he was gonna hurt her.
That was 2 weeks before the murder on Avon. Maxwell's defense attorney, though, challenged Dorsey's testimony, saying it conflicted with his statement to police.
In fact, Latrice's new partner, Paul Dorsey, actually received phone calls from Maxwell threatening to hurt her. According to the traumatized dad and husband, Maxwell called twice, saying he'd kill Latrice when next he sees her.
Well, no, sir. What did I just say? I said, first time I said, he called back, he said he'd kill her. He called back 5 minutes later, told me he wasn't going to kill her. But that's what he said. He said twice he was going to kill her.
Okay, but that's not what's in your statement, is it?
Yeah, that's because, let me tell you why. That's because my wife was dead, and I'm going through my mind crazy, okay? And you guys question me. I know, go ahead.
Meanwhile, Maxwell, on the other hand, gave a statement claiming that he shot Latrice accidentally. Maxwell also argued extensively on how much he loved Latrice and couldn't bear to see her with another man. But of course, no one in court that day believed this, especially considering the fact that Latrice was shot a whopping 10 times. There were gunshot wounds in her hands, the back of her head, and throughout her body. The chances that all of that was a mistake were pretty much zero, and then again there was evidence that Maxwell fled the scene after committing the crime. In any case, the highlight of the trial was when Latrice's daughter came face to face with the killer and made her true feelings clear.
My mom was the nicest person, the most caring person, and for you to take her out of my life like that hurts my heart so much.
What disgusted her children even more?
We were supposed to be dating. We were still dating until this plumber guy came along. Okay, I'm gonna leave that alone.
Maxwell continued on with things that had the judge telling him to zip it until finally...
But I was wrong. I was wrong, and I'm sorry, and ain't no way I can repay this. It's between me and the Lord now. I just want to let y'all know that I have repented with every bone in my body, and I can never take this back down here on this earth. And I just want to let y'all know that the Lord gave me a dream that she's with the Lord. And that's the only thing that kept me from killing myself.
In the end, Maxwell pleaded guilty to murder. He was given a sentence of 25 to 50 years in prison in June 2018. Haley Anderson. It was on March 8, 2018, when Haley Anderson, a trainee nurse at Binghamton Medical School, went partying with her friends. After the party, she headed home alone. But then, at about 3:15 a.m., they received a disturbing message from Haley. She was in trouble. The following morning, on March 10th, Haley's friends decided to assemble at her place, but she wasn't there. When Haley's friends used an app to track her phone, the location that popped up was her ex-boyfriend. Curious and determined, the girls headed there, wondering what was wrong. One of the girls climbed in through the window and tiptoed to the bedroom. That's when she came face to face with the shocking discovery.
Then I see Orlando's bedroom and Haley is there. I didn't know for sure that she was dead at the time. She just was so pale, you know.
Upon sighting Haley's lifeless body, the girls dialed 911. But then, they were left with a mystery in their hands. A mystery of how a lively, bright nursing student became a lifeless corpse.
Authorities say he left the country before police found Haley Anderson's body in her apartment near the campus of Binghamton University. Investigators have ruled her death a homicide.
It turns out that during the course of her studentship, Haley had become entangled in a romantic affair with another nursing student by the name of Orlando Enrique Tercero Moreno. Their relationship kicked off in 2017 after a party similar to the one Haley attended before her death. However, the thing is, Haley was never fully committed to Orlando. In fact, she was in a serious relationship at the time and only got in with Orlando after she took a break from her main partner. Of course, she made this clear to Orlando, but the young man never saw it that way. To him, Haley was his world. When Haley began to slowly pull away from Orlando, he began to act up. It was from that point things started falling apart.
He used to stop by a lot to come like smoke a cigarette on our porch. He definitely used to drive by because it's hard for her to be like to her friend, you need to leave, like this is not appropriate. So there were nights where I would have to go out and be like, Orlando, you need to leave, you can't just show up at our house.
Why do you think he did that?
Because he was jealous. He just didn't want to see someone else over there.
You think Orlando was obsessed with Haley?
Yeah.
One time, Haley woke up to find all her tires flat. Someone had slashed them all clean with a knife. Every one of her friends knew Orlando, the jealous ex-boyfriend, was the one to commit such an act. But Haley didn't want to press charges so Orlando wouldn't be kicked out of nursing school. According to reports, Haley was strangled to death. It was a brutal death. However, what's even more disturbing about this murder is what the criminal did after committing the crime. The crazy Orlando had attempted to cheat his way out of getting punished after noticing Haley was dead. It wasn't long after Orlando fled that Haley's friends came and found her lifeless body. And so that same day, a manhunt was issued for him. However, before anyone could trace the steps of this evil nursing student, he had already exited the country on a flight to South America, his original home. It turns out that Orlando had dual citizenship. His parents were from Nicaragua, but he was born in Miami. Also, he grew up in Nicaragua, and so he was heading back to his home turf, and chances of Haley getting any justice were slowly slipping away. But as luck would have it, local police in Managua picked up Orlando at a local hospital where he had gone to get a head injury checked. He was arrested there and put on trial right there in his home country. Orlando was charged with femicide, which means a murder involving a feminine gender. And just so you know, this is a serious crime in Latin America. When Orlando's trial began in 2019, all parts of the story came to light, from his possessiveness of Haley to the tire-slashing incident. Haley's friends, as well as her mom, also said their parts of the story.
Haley was a beautiful, intelligent, and friendly girl. She was an aspiring nurse and had her whole life to look forward to. She was, and still is, my best friend. So thank you for listening and letting me speak on behalf of my daughter.
Orlando was declared guilty. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, but that wasn't the worst part. He was going to spend his time behind bars with notorious gangsters and drug barons, the worst of the worst criminals. Moreover, the prisons in that part of the world were by far worse than those in America. As it turned out, running back to his home was a huge mistake. Ciara Grimes. On May 9, 2018, police received a 911 emergency. Someone had been shot in the Northern Crescent neighborhood. When two officers responded, they found Ciara Grimes lying on the floor, a gunshot wound in her arm. Ciara's friend Haley Winters was there with her, and when the cops asked her who made the call, she admitted she didn't know. According to Haley, she and Ciara were supposed to meet up, but when she finally caught up to Ciara, she had already been shot. The cops then proceeded to ask Ciara some questions, but strangely she couldn't speak. That's when they noticed that her inability to speak was because the bullet had passed through her arm and gone into her chest. Immediately, an ambulance was called to rush Ciara to the hospital. The cops stayed behind to obtain more information from Ciara's friend, but nothing much came forth from it. All Haley could tell was that Ciara was stumbling around when she arrived at the meeting point. As she went closer, Ciara suddenly slumped, and that's when she saw the condition she was in and decided to help her while someone else dialed the police. However, the officers weren't fully believing the story.
First clue my partner and I had that Haley wasn't being completely honest was the way they were dressed.
Ciara and Haley were wearing tank tops and shorts, and in Rochester, Maine, it's not considered very warm that time of day.
So it didn't appear that she'd been walking down the street. It appeared that they'd both just come out of a house.
No one in the neighborhood had any worthwhile thing to say, except a certain couple who advised the cops to make inquiries at a certain house. The owners of the apartment in question were notorious for blasting loud music and hosting parties at odd hours of the night. When the cops got to the house, they saw blood on the porch and also sighted someone peeping at them through the windows. These were all indications that whatever happened to Ciara that night must have gone down in this this apartment or the nearby vicinity. The cops were on edge. However, just when they were about to step in, a voice yelled at them from inside, asking if they had a warrant. Of course they hadn't, so they couldn't enter. But then, a few hours later, at about 1:45 a.m., the cops received a call from the hospital. Ciara had given up the ghost. The case was now a murder case, and the officers swung into full action.
We wanted to have the witnesses believe that Sierra was still alive and that she would be able to communicate with us and tell us what actually happened. So it was kind of an investigative tool.
When the cops returned to the neighborhood, they got something out of one of the neighbors. The man admitted that he had heard a gunshot, and then when he looked out the window, he saw a group of people carrying Ciara onto the pavement. He also disclosed that the group fled the scene in different directions afterward. Hearing this, the cops stormed the house they had been to previously, the same house that had blood on the porch. A SWAT team was used this time. 2 women were arrested inside, and they also found Kiara's ID inside the house, but they couldn't pinpoint where exactly the crime had taken place inside. After more frantic searching, they found the gun. The culprit, whoever it was, had hidden it under a pile of leaves a short distance away from the apartment. The officers also checked the CCTV footage and found 5 suspects carrying Ciara onto the pavement. Ciara's friend, Haley, was among them. It didn't take long for the cops to arrest and detain 4 of the suspects on the footage. Each suspect was interrogated separately, and no one knew what the others would say. Plus, none of them knew that Ciara was already dead.
They were very uncooperative, kind of had an anti-police attitude.
But then, after none of the suspects were forthcoming, the officers decided to break the sad news of Ciara's death to Haley.
Put your arm and into her chest.
Are you dead serious? Are you dead serious?
Upon hearing the news, Haley completely broke down.
I wish I could tell you otherwise, but...
Yo, no she didn't. No she didn't.
And I know you're worried about talking, but you have to realize that the people in the house treated Sierra like she was a piece of trash and just took her out of the house and threw her on the front lawn.
After breaking the sad news of Ciara's death to her friend, Haley was left alone. The cops then proceeded to tell Ciara's parents about her death.
She's a good girl, you know, she just ended up
Happy.
she
Looking
just ended
for love in
up
the
the wrong places and turning of events, and one thing led to another. And that's why I say that domestic violence is real.
In the midst of prayer for Sierra and her family, a plea from many to live in peace.
We need to stand together because you know what? Little do you know, she was going through something, and no one did nothing to stop it. You know what I'm saying? My baby is gone. I will never see her again. I have to move on day by day.
Perez and Grimes' grandfather tried to console one another outside of court.
I think it's a devastating incident that is going to be felt for years for these people.
This was the turning point of the investigation, as Ciara's parents confided in the police that Jermaine, her boyfriend, could be involved in her death. The cops put 2 and 2 together and predicted that Jermaine must be the 5th suspect, the one that all the other parties were protecting. When the cops dug even further, they realized just how notorious Jermaine was. During his last year in high school, he started getting involved with bad gangs, selling narcotics, and doing all sorts of things that would make him get kicked out of school. His love for Ciara slowly began to turn into possession, and he even began to physically abuse the young girl.
One day my mailman came and knocked on my door and told me that my daughter was being beat by him on the next street. I grabbed that boy and I nearly strangled him and told him, "You better stop touching my daughter," because I was gonna call the cops on him. And he said he didn't care.
It was at this point that Ciara's mom, as well as the rest of the family, began to urge her to call off the relationship. Ciara decided to heed her mom's words. She called it quits with Jermaine. The cops were called into the matter, and on May 5th, 2018, a protection order was issued to help keep Ciara safe from Jermaine. But here's the shocking part. It was barely 4 days after this order of protection was obtained that Ciara was found dead. The cops finally went back and obtained the full story from Ciara's friend, Haley. It turned out that Ciara had gone back to see Jermaine after the protection order, and he convinced her to follow him back to the house. It was at the house that Jermaine pulled out a gun and shot Ciara. It took quite quite a while before the cops were able to find Jermaine. Interestingly, he showed up by himself at court, where he was supposed to appear for a different crime he had committed in the past. He was arrested on the spot. According to the police, Jermaine never showed any remorse in court. He claimed his gun had gone off by accident and refused to answer questions thrown at him. He was charged with manslaughter. Finally, in October 2018, Jermaine pleaded guilty to manslaughter. He was given a 6-year sentence, much to the dismay of family and friends of Sierra. Sierra's case was quite sad, especially since she was so young. However, an even sadder case was that of Sierra Jameson.
Sierra was a hard-working, independent young woman. She had goals and dreams.
This is Sierra Jameson, a vibrant 30-year-old mother from Chicago who had her entire life ahead of her. Sadly, her life was cut tragically short when she was brutally murdered just steps away from her own home. Her family was left devastated, struggling to understand why this happened to their beloved Sierra.
Truly took a gift from God away from us, and it's beyond sad.
Who would want to harm this ambitious young woman with a bright future? And what dark secrets would the investigation uncover about her final days? The details of this case are disturbing, but before we get into that, let's go back to the beginning to understand how everything unfolded. At the time of the incident, Sierra Jameson was living in Chicago, Illinois with her 6-year-old son. She had recently celebrated her 30th birthday and was working as a phlebotomist while pursuing her dream of becoming a nurse. Family and friends described Sierra as outgoing, hardworking, and devoted to her young son. She always had a bright smile on her face that could light up a room. Her aunt, Sadina Jameson, said, "Sierra was so full of life. She worked hard to provide for her son and was determined to build a better future for both of them. She had such big dreams." Sierra's mother, Alice Jameson, said her daughter was her best friend and her everything. The two were extremely close, with Alice recently moving in with Sierra and her grandson. Despite facing challenges as a young single mother, Sierra was ambitious and passionate about her goals. She had enrolled in nursing school and was excited to start a new chapter in her life. She wanted so much out of life and was going for it, her mother said. Sierra was smart and driven. I knew she was going to accomplish great things. Just a month before her death, Sierra had a harrowing experience that would later take on a tragic irony. She was the victim of an attempted carjacking, an incident that she bravely fought off.
My thoughts are that it's I don't know why a lot of people want to target young women. I guess because we women and they don't think that we're easy to target. I guess that's the situation. I guess that's the issue, because we'll probably be more vulnerable to give up and let go or whatever the case may be.
In an interview with CBS Chicago reporter Dorothy Tucker, Sierra recounted the experience. "My Jeep, my Wrangler, that was something for a gift for myself, because I know how hard I worked for it. I know how many sacrifices I've done for my family, my son, because he's been through a lot. My son had open heart surgery. He has a disability, so he means a lot to me. And I'm not going to let this young man, with a knife at that, take anything I work hard away from me." Little did Sierra know that speaking out against violence would be one of her final acts.
No problem, they're always quiet, no problems at all. Always quiet. Good people. It's a tragedy.
On the evening of September 18th, 2023, Sierra told her mother she was going to park her Jeep in the garage behind their rental home in the Grand Crossing neighborhood. It should have only taken a few minutes, but Sierra never came back inside. Growing concerned when she couldn't reach her daughter, Alice Jameson went to check the garage around 7:30 p.m. What she found was every mother's worst nightmare: Sierra's lifeless body, partially concealed under a tarp. "I can't wrap my mind around it, seeing her in this garage like that. I am really hurting right now," a devastated Alice later told reporters. Police and paramedics quickly responded to the scene, but it was too late. Sierra Jameson was pronounced dead at just 30 years old. The medical examiner would later determine that Sierra had been strangled to death. Her bright future and all her dreams were extinguished in a brutal act of violence. As news of the young mother's murder spread, the community was stunned. Who would want to harm Sierra, and why kill her in such a personal, intimate way? Desperate for answers, Sierra's family pleaded for anyone with information to come forward. Her aunt Sadina said, "We are begging anyone who knows anything to please speak up. Sierra's son needs justice for his mother. Our family needs closure." Meanwhile, Chicago police launched an intensive investigation, combing the crime scene for evidence and interviewing neighbors and potential witnesses. Detectives learned that Sierra had last been seen alive entering the alley behind her home around 6:30 p.m. on September 18th. Her Jeep was still parked in the garage where her body was found. As they dug deeper into Sierra's life, investigators discovered something intriguing. Just weeks earlier, Sierra had been interviewed by a local news station for a story on violence against black women in Chicago. CBS reporter Dorothy Tucker, who had interviewed Sierra, was devastated by the news of her death. She reflected, she wanted to be able to say, "Let me tell people what it's like to be a black woman today, and fearful so many times." Sierra's death was the example, demonstrating the importance of us doing this story, to talk about what happens to black women. As the investigation continued, detectives worked to piece together Sierra's final hours. They obtained surveillance footage from nearby businesses and homes, hoping to spot anything suspicious. They also delved into Sierra's phone records and social media accounts, looking for clues about who she may have been in contact with leading up to her death. At first, there were few leads. Sierra didn't seem to have any obvious enemies. She was well liked at work and known as a devoted mother. Who would want her dead?
He was in a dating relationship with.
But as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something surprising. Sierra had recently begun a romantic relationship with an older man named Lawrence Boyle. At 63 years old, Lawrence Curtis Boyle was more than twice Sierra's age. He had known her for about a decade, but their relationship had only turned romantic a few weeks before her death.
Boyle had a previous 2011 domestic violence aggravated assault with a deadly weapon arrest and was charged in March of that year. A month later, the case was dropped. Boyle was also convicted in 1993 of child abuse in North Carolina, and 6 years later was out of prison by 1999. In court, it was also revealed Boyle served 2 years for breaking and entering in the North Carolina Department of Corrections and had a 1997 misdemeanor conviction for assault on a woman.
As detectives looked into Boyle's background, red flags quickly emerged. He had a troubling history of violence against women, including a 2011 domestic violence charge that was later dropped. Even more disturbing, he had a 1993 conviction for child abuse in North Carolina, for which he served 7 years in prison. Boyle suddenly became the prime suspect in Sierra's murder. But building a case against him wouldn't be easy. Then came a major break in the case. On September 20th, just 2 days after Sierra's body was found, Lawrence Boyle turned himself in to police. In a shocking twist, Boyle allegedly confessed to strangling Sierra to death in the garage, according to the charging documents.
He thought Jamison had a gun, but when he realized she didn't, he continued to strangle her until she went limp. He took her cell phone, then covered her body with a green tarp. Prosecutors say that Boyle admitted to his ex-wife and police to strangling Jamison. The judge ordered him detained.
With Boyle in custody, Sierra's grieving family felt a small measure of relief. Her Aunt Sadina said,
"Honoring her legacy, we're honoring her life. But today we have a victory because this person has been caught. He is currently in custody."
"We are honoring her legacy. We are honoring her life. But today, we have a victory because this person has been caught. He is currently in custody. So yes, we can celebrate with a little bit of peace." But the family was also grappling with feelings of betrayal and shock. Boyle wasn't a stranger. He was someone Sierra had known and trusted for years. "This is someone she was comfortable around," Sadina explained. "This is someone she trusted, so she had no reason to fear." As more details emerged about the relationship between Sierra and Boyle, a disturbing picture began to take shape. Prosecutors alleged that Boyle had known Sierra for years, raising questions as to why he would commit such a heinous crime on her. Their romantic involvement was very recent, but the significant age gap and power imbalance were troubling. Had Sierra finally tried to end things, provoking Boyle's rage? At Boyle's first court appearance, prosecutors laid out the chilling details of the crime. Assistant State's Attorney Ann McCord Rogers told the judge,
"He used his 2 hands to suffocate the life out of someone he was in a dating relationship with."
The brutality of the crime shocked even veteran courtroom observers. This wasn't a crime of passion or a split-second loss of control. Boyle had allegedly waited for Sierra in the garage, planning to ambush her. The strangulation would have taken several agonizing minutes. Sierra would have been aware of what was happening, desperately fighting for her life as Boyle allegedly squeezed the breath from her body. Medical examiners' pathologists found marks on Sierra's neck consistent with fingernails, hemorrhages near the top of her spine, as well as bruising on her tongue, further evidence of the violent struggle. It was a horrific end for a young woman who had already endured so much. Sierra had bravely fought off an armed carjacker just months earlier, but in the end, the man who took her life was someone she thought she could trust. As the case against Boyle proceeded, Sierra's family was left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Her 6-year-old son, who has autism, now faced a future without his devoted mother. Alice Jamison, Sierra's mother, took on the responsibility of raising her grandson, but she worried about how to explain to him that his mom was never coming home. "He keeps asking for her," Alice said, fighting back tears. "How do I tell him that she's gone forever, that the person who was supposed to love her took her away from us?"
God, please help us. Help us help each other.
A large group gathered in Garfield Park on Wednesday evening to celebrate the life of Sierra Jamison.
A GoFundMe campaign was started to help support her young son, but nothing could fill the void left by Sierra's absence. Her family spoke of her infectious laugh, her determination to succeed against the odds, her dreams of becoming a nurse. As the case made headlines, it reignited conversations about violence against women, particularly women of color. Sierra's story was tragically similar to so many others. A young mother killed by someone she knew and trusted, Dorothy Tucker, the reporter who had interviewed Sierra, reflected on the painful irony of her death coming so soon after speaking out about violence. Sierra's case exemplifies why we need to keep having these difficult conversations. Her voice was silenced, just as she was finding the courage to speak up. In the wake of Sierra's murder, local advocacy groups called for better resources and support for women facing domestic violence. They emphasized the importance of recognizing warning signs in relationships, particularly those with large age gaps or power imbalances. As the case against Lawrence Boyle moved forward, prosecutors expressed confidence in securing a conviction. The alleged confession to his ex-wife, combined with physical evidence from the scene, painted a damning picture. During Boyle's detention hearing, Judge Susana L. Ortiz called his self-defense claims self-serving before ordering him to be detained. She stated, "There is absolutely no evidence that this victim was armed. What there was evidence of is he literally used his 2 hands to suffocate the life out of someone he was in a dating relationship with. He used his own force, and he did this in a way that is dangerous and presents danger to the community. If convicted of first-degree murder, Boyle could face life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Sierra's family, it would be a small measure of justice, but nothing could truly make up for their loss." Alice Jamison said, "I want this man to rot in prison for the rest of his life, but it won't bring my baby back. It won't give my grandson his mother again. We have to live with this pain forever." The tragic story of Sierra Jamison serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability many women face, even from those closest to them. Her death left a void in her family and community that can never truly be filled. Sierra was more than just a victim. She was a devoted mother, a hard worker with big dreams, a survivor who had already overcome so much adversity in her young life. She deserved so much more than to have her life cut short in such a brutal way. As the legal process unfolds, Sierra's loved ones are determined to keep her memory alive. They speak of her bright smile, her infectious laugh, her unwavering love for her son. "We want Sierra to be remembered for how she lived, not just how she died," Sedina said. "She brought so much light into this world in her 30 years. That light may be gone, but we'll never let it be forgotten." Sierra Jamison's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the ongoing epidemic of violence against women. Her voice was silenced just as she was finding the courage to speak out. Now, it falls to the rest of us to continue that fight in her name. For Sierra, for her son, and for countless other victims, we must keep pushing for a world where women can live without fear. A world where bright futures aren't extinguished by senseless violence. A world where mothers like Sierra get to see their children grow up. It's too late for Sierra Jamison, but in sharing her story, perhaps we can help prevent other families from experiencing such a devastating loss. Her light may be gone, but her impact lives on. What do you think about this case? Let me know in the comments section. And if you found this video interesting, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories.